Yeah, there's not much to say, is there? I'm gonna pick Little Nog to win by knockout though, because that's how these things work.
Yeah, me too. Sounds right. Just he's still like, and has always been like the more accurate and quicker puncher. So that's it. That's my only reasoning.
Yep.
Is that Shogun is going to come in looking?
It's just how it works.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
When there's two people and they have a rivalry, and then they're like, oh yeah, someone's clearly won this one. Let's run it back.
When they're really old.
Years later, now that we're totally shot.
Yep.
And the other guy will always get his revenge. He will always just completely fucking waste the other guy.
That's true.
And you'll be like, yeah, this really doesn't matter. Tito or Andre or Rampage.
Right.
Or like...
Yep.
You're like, no, I know you'd like to think that this means that you said something about your rivalry, but it just means you're the less shot one.
Yep.
And you're both really shot.
Is Little Nog less shot than Shogun?
He knocked out Sam Alvey more recently than Shogun's done anything.
Yeah. Knocking out Sam Alvey is not as impressive as knocking out John Vellante, I don't think.
Yeah, but it was only like 2 years ago, and John Vellante was like 4 years ago.
Yeah, I also said, didn't Sam Alvey beat John Vellante?
Yes. Good point.
He did. All right, MMA Math has Little Nog as the necessary pick. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. Phil, have I shocked you with my sudden uptick in energy for showtime?
Someone's going to have to bring it because you've got a 15-fight main card to break down on the vivisection. So it's good that you're coming in.
Be quiet.
With a lot of energy.
Don't remind me of that. Yeah, I gotta be honest, before they added these, I guess I should say before I let Phil distract me, as he so loves to do, we're going to be talking about two cards this week, no surprise there. Try and guess. Is one of them going to be next week's card, and one of them is going to be last week's card? If that's what you thought, you are correct. Whittaker versus Till is our upcoming main event, which to me is a very fascinating fight. A big sort of... I don't know, check up on where both of these guys are at in their careers. Two fighters who are either regressing or improving, and it's not 100% clear that either of those things are really true to me. So I'm very interested to get into that one. There's a couple other fights set for this card as well. After that, we are going to go back to last week's tragic main event. Truly heartbreaking for me. And a lot of other really impressive performances, actually. It was a very solid card. I think, as we expected going in, a very meaningful card. What I was going to say, though, Phil, is that I was really hyped for this upcoming card before they made it a 15-fight card. There's a lot of good matchups on here. There's a lot of matchups I really like. You know, even ones that we're not really going to get to discuss. Even ones where I don't even care about the matchup, I just want to see these developing fighters. Like, I want to see Ramzan Emaev. I want to see Nathaniel Wood. You know? I want to see Nicholas Dalby 2.0 again. Hell yeah. I want to see a jacked Dane stepping into the octagon, disproving everyone who ever said he wasn't a plus athlete. Like some idiots who used to sit in your chair, Phil.
I mean, he's still not.
Shut up. No, I will not brook this fucking disagreement, all right? We will have order on Heavy Hands. We all like Nicholas Dalby. It's still a good card. You know, for example, one of the fights they recently added that contributes to the bloat here is a very quick turnaround for Khamzat Chimaev, who I have already decided I'm going to be campaigning to make his nickname Kazmat Hazmat Chimaev. What do you think? It's good. It sounds like his name.
Yes, Connor, I get it.
Fuck you. Phil's the one who came up with the Reaper, by the way, since we're going to be talking about Robert Whittaker. That was Phil's idea. No. So, it's still not a bad card. It's just it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. But there's plenty of good stuff to discuss here. Of course, we're going to start with the main event. Robert Whittaker, Darren Till. As I said before, to me, what this makes me want to do is look very closely at the last two fights each of these men has had. Because I feel that and I'm not sure there's even one person sharing both of these beliefs. But it does feel that the consensus idea is that Darren Till had a smarter performance than ever before against Kelvin Gastelum. That he won with a very careful game plan, and that suggests that he might be getting better, and that middleweight might be a good home for him. And on the other hand, there is the idea that Robert Whittaker looked worse than ever, and therefore might be sort of nearing the end of his prime, based on what we saw in his fight with Israel Adesanya. I'm not sure either of those things are true, personally. What do you think, Phil?
I think they're true to an extent. I think it was a smart performance from Till against Gastelum. He pretty much diffused Gastelum as well as he ever has been. Mm-hmm. And the Whittaker performance was it was certainly somewhat strange.
Sure.
It was, even without all the stories of him hugely overtraining, he was swinging pretty wild.
Oh yeah.
He did look like a man for whom the moment was getting to him.
I guess my main disagreement is not with those two things being characterized as they are. I agree Darren Till fought a smart fight, and I agree that Robert Whittaker did not look like the best Robert Whittaker. It's more the implications that are drawn from these two fights for these fighters going forward that I'm not sure about.
Yeah, the main thing is does it matter?
Right.
As in, is Robert Whittaker deteriorated? The basic question we're asking here is Robert Whittaker deteriorated enough to lose to Darren Till? And,
sure.
I think, not to spoil how I think we're going to be approaching this, but I think that's the basic question, and to spoil the answer, but I think we're probably saying that the answer is no, he's not deteriorated enough to lose to Darren Till, not based on the information that we've got available.
Yeah, what I was kind of talking around is that I think the same Robert Whittaker that lost to Israel Adesanya, I would still pick that exact man over Darren Till. I think Jorge Masvidal already did a pretty comprehensive job of proving that throwing everything really hard and rushing in with flurries of attacks, pretty effective against Darren Till. I don't know if do you think we've debunked enough on this show the idea that Darren Till is a counterpuncher? Because I know we've touched on it before, but I still hear this from people a lot, and I think it's weird. People, maybe this has to do with Dr. Wyman's old belief that MMA fans are uniquely bad at seeing counterpunches, so they can't tell whether they're happening or not. But any fighter who is reads as technical, whatever that means, anyone who sort of reads as the Joe Rogan version of technical, it seems like fans want to call that person a counterpuncher. If you have anything resembling evasive footwork, or you throw straight punches, you're a counterpuncher. I don't think that's ever been true of Darren Till. What has Darren Till ever done well off of the back foot? Can you think of a moment in his UFC career? I can't even think of a lot of counters off the front foot, but
I am genuinely thinking.
Right?
Yeah.
We've had some moments, I think, like in the Velichkovic fight where I think he stepped in with an elbow. He can create some collisions. That does not a counterpuncher make. I just don't think that's an apt characterization of Darren Till's style. I think he's a pressure fighter, and I think he's a relatively low output one who still relies on his reach. Now, granted, this is where we get into the discussion of the Gastelum fight. That was not a pressure fighting performance at all. that was a long-range sort of punch and clutch, as Jack Slack might put it. A sort of punch and clutch outboxing performance, which does represent a sort of stylistic shift. But the main problem I have with imagining that same approach, if that's Darren Till's new thing, the main problem I have with seeing that same approach working against Robert Whittaker is that I don't think Kelvin Gastelum did a good job of answering it. There were holes that I really believe could have been poked in Darren Till's game, and you sound in disbelief, Phil.
Not Kelvin Gastelum.
We're going to be talking about a recent Kelvin Gastelum performance later in the show, which I know a lot of people, a lot of these fight site lads in particular, who are just like meaner versions of me. They really, really like the technique over the athleticism, and therefore they resent athleticism. They're really happy to see that. But I tend to agree with the broad idea that, Kelvin Gastelum just tried to have the same engagement with Darren Till over and over. Like, he never even made an adjustment to the fact that Till was just ducking his head under the left hand and crashing into the clinch. He didn't come up with any further layers in the clinch once he got there. He didn't try a different sort of entry or any, it was like one note. It was like a bad women's bantamweight fight. It was like Felice Herrig versus Courtney Casey, where you just watch them have the same exchange over and over, except, Darren Till looked like the smarter fighter because those exchanges were favoring him.
So, I mentioned this before the show, but that fight really did sort of, I think we did praise it a reasonable amount because it was a smart performance from Till, and it represented, a change in directionality from him, and it was all very appropriate. But it did also, on rewatch, it also really brings back the fact that Darren Till's ideal, round-winning, consistent performance is just not fun to watch. He is a pretty glacially paced fighter.
Yeah.
Who just doesn't do a whole lot if he's not forced to.
He's a left hand. That's what he wants to land. And he's not Nasrat Haqparast out here. He's not going to pour that punch on over and over again. He's a precision. He's just like a worse Conor McGregor.
Without the counterpunching. Yeah, so, basically, the dynamic seems to be that there's a big, tall guy who doesn't do actually particularly well when forced back or put into high-paced situations, and Whittaker does both of those things super well.
Right.
Or at least he might not be the most, the safest incoming fighter, as we saw against Adesanya.
Uh-huh.
But like you said, even if he's swinging wild in those situations, those aren't the situations where Till tends to knock people out. Conversely, I think Till's adjustments that he's had at middleweight, and I think that was an adjustment against Gastelum as well. That was a technical one, not merely just a Gastelum-specific one, was ducking and slipping his head a lot more. I think that might get played against him by Whittaker, who is far more likely to punch into kick combinations.
Yes. Also just far more likely to, maybe put an uppercut behind that entering jab. Anything. Yeah. Darren Till's main response to Gastelum's same left hand over and over was to basically duck straight down and crash into the clinch. There wasn't even like a roll. There was no lateral movement in the evasive head movement. So,
yeah, I think Till is dialed in from the start of the fight. It's one of his is one of his strengths. So I could see him hurting Whittaker early, but still don't think he can finish him. He hasn't been that much of a puncher. And it's 5 rounds. Not sure how he wins a 5-round fight with Robert Whittaker. Unless something has changed in Whittaker beyond what we saw in the Adesanya fight, he can't slow a fight with Whittaker down to the kind of pace which the Thompson and Gastelum fights were at.
God, no.
It just won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. We should talk about Whittaker at least a little bit. It is possible he's, that we're seeing signs of decline. Like, the man had a very rough championship era. The 2 fights with Yoel Romero, both of them brutal in their own ways. Myriad injuries. I think, what was the story with the Adesanya fight? Did that keep getting rescheduled? And Whittaker was just, like, in camp for 8 months or whatever? I seem to recall him saying he was training for a very, very long time. And basically hated it by the time that fight came around, which is not something you want to hear. We're going to have an opportunity later, Phil, to talk about 2 fighters who seem to hate fighting. And we're not going to be saying good things about them. It's not a good place to be. So I do tend to think that that Whittaker, I think there's at least a good chance that he's not really declining that quickly yet. That he ended up in a bad spot and didn't show his best performance. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know. I still thought he had good moments against Adesanya, too. I just think he kind of keyed in on the wrong adjustments. Like, it's been said to death by now, but he wanted to do a thing that works against the vast majority of MMA fighters, which is to create an exchange, prevent the counter from landing, and then follow up, lengthening, adding more offensive layers to the exchange. And most of the time, when somebody gets into past that first layer and they either hit you or they miss and then they try to get away, they're done. And Adesanya is one of the few who has more counters ready. That was not a good adjustment from Robert Whittaker. But there were also, like, a lot of jabs landed for Whittaker in that fight that looked really nice. I noted to you before that whenever he initiated an attack with his defense, whenever it was a counter, and frequently when it was like a re-counter, a counter to a counter, he had a lot of success. Anytime that Adesanya had to step in with a jab and Whittaker slipped, and that's how he closed the gap, and then threw a left hook or something off of that, he was landing those shots and not getting hit in return. We still saw, I think, what makes Whittaker so good. But at the end of the day, if it's the exact same Robert Whittaker, if he's lunging in crazily, throwing everything with maximum power, what is Darren Till going to do about that? Other than get hit in the face. I just don't see it. I feel like I'm certainly setting myself up for a crushing disappointment. Because I really feel like this is an easy call to make for Robert Whittaker, to be honest. Is that it?
Yeah. I mean, Till has surprised us before. I definitely wouldn't have thought he could beat Stephen Thompson. But yeah, I think it's just that most of his skill is just largely in kind of feints and offsetting his offensive timing and being insulated by his reach on the return.
Yes.
I think Gastelum, a bit like Hendricks versus what's his face, Lombard back in the day. Gastelum was sort of an introductory middleweight who was in fact from the same weight class that Till just left.
Yes.
So it's like, wow, being super tall works really well at this weight class too. It's like, yes, everyone at this weight class is not in fact the same. Does not have the physical dimensions of Kelvin Gastelum.
That's a good point. Well, the funny thing, I mean, Whittaker is also himself a former welterweight. But he is also like 220 pounds. He's certainly bigger and taller than Kelvin Gastelum. I think he is also, at least at his best, just as explosive. And cleverer about covering the distance, too. Even in the Adesanya fight, he was cleverer than Gastelum has ever been. He's just maybe not as durable as Kelvin Gastelum.
Hot take for today's
right?
show.
Yeah, I mean, who
Robert
is?
Whittaker is cleverer than Kelvin Gastelum.
Okay. I think that's the first segment. I don't know what else to say about this matchup. I just set myself on a very high, very rickety tower. I'm just waiting for this weekend to pass so I can fall down. When Darren Till knocks Robert Whittaker out somehow in the 4th round. He's going to pressure him for 3 rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to knock him out late. No, I think Whittaker is maybe going to have some trouble early. I think the fight will become better and better for him as it goes on. And and that's whether or not Darren Till comes out with... I mean, I think Darren Till would be better suited to come out with the old school pressure, to be honest, than the more sort of laid-back style that worked so well against Gastelum. All right.
Yep.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, we're taking a break. When we come back, Jesus Christ, are there some other fights to discuss? These next two, Shogun Rua versus Little Nog. 3? Is this 3 or 4?
3.
Okay. Their third fight, they're both 80 years old. It's incredibly stupid, but also, what the hell else are they going to... They're still on contract. Who else? I don't want to see them fight anybody else, so I'm fine with it. Fabricio Verdum versus Alexander Gustafsson. You may have recall me mentioning people who seem to hate fighting earlier. That might be prescient to that matchup there, and more after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
What do you say? Should we keep rolling, or...?
Yeah, let's just get into it.
Okay. All right, we are back. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Shogun Rua versus Little Nog 3. Can you think of a worse 3? Godfather 3? What's the third Aliens called?
Just for MMA trilogies, there's got to be a few worse ones.
Well,
Ortiz Liddell.
Ooh. I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think... I don't want to steal your point, Phil, but there was something that you said before that I think is the only meaningful lens through which we can predict this fight. Because it's dumb. Like, both of these guys are completely shot. We spend so much time on this show wondering if a fighter is shot or what to take. No, these guys are past it. Very clearly past it. Neither of them is as durable as they used to be. They're both just incredibly slow compared to their old selves. They both, like, when they walk around, you can hear their knee bones grinding audibly, even over the crowd noise. They're ancient and they look like shit. So what you said before is the only way to predict this fight is that we have seen this happen many times in MMA, where two fighters will have a sort of series where one is clearly better than the other when they're in their primes. And in the moment both of them fall off, for whatever reason, the loser, that's when they get their revenge. We saw it with the Vanderlei Rampage one was the first one that jumped to my mind when you mentioned that. We saw it with, what else?
Ortiz Liddell.
Oh, yes, of course. It's happened a lot. I'm now blanking on more examples, but...
Arlovsky, Tim Sylvia.
Oh, that's a very good one.
Their fourth fight, where Arlovsky punted his head into the stands.
That's a very good one. Yes, I also like that you have correctly pointed out that at his best, Tim Sylvia was a better fighter than Andrei Arlovsky. It's just the truth. So yeah, basically that leads us to believe that Little Nog is going to win this time. He's going to finally get the win in the rubber match that isn't a rubber match because Shogun has beaten him twice before.
Yeah. Also, like, it just doesn't feel right to compare anything about what these guys have left anymore to rubber. It's just like, it's a concrete match.
Yeah, rubber springs back, you know. Rubber's got some give to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in your point at the beginning, I was being a bit facetious with like worse trilogies, but I mean, you're right in that it's dropped from an incredibly high height in the first fight to something which is probably going to be really awful. I mean, their second fight, to be honest, wasn't half bad. They were still pretty...
For what it was.
Yeah, it was still pretty done, but it was interesting. We saw leg kick Shogun make a bit of a return. It was a bit like one of those. It was a bit like Big Nog Couture, where
oh my god. I was just thinking, man, we thought they were shot then. Phil, that fight was 5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
That was half a decade ago. We thought they were so old then. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just...
Yeah. That's why I remember being surprised at how okay that fight was.
Yeah.
But as I've said before, we thought Shogun was shot when he fought Gustafsson. I mean, because he kind of was.
Yes.
If you look back at him in that fight, you will be blown away at how explosive and quick and young he looks.
Yes.
Still kind of shot. So yeah, these guys are going to look absolutely dreadful. A big part of what has allowed Shogun to win their previous fights has been the wrestling. This is one of the things that Little Nog has weirdly gotten better at over time.
Oh, he's going to wrestle so much in this fight, though. Why did I not even think of that? He wrestled Paul Craig, for God's sake.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
But Nog has gotten better at defending takedowns because he can't move his legs or his lower body anymore. It's just like trying to take down a statue. So he's going to win. He's going to win by the punching.
That sucks so bad. He's gotten better at takedown defense because he can't move. Oh my god. This fight is such a joke. Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I think just having a slight improvement in wrestling, it's gotten to a point where it feels like that's sort of all Shogun has left. There was a brief window there where he was getting better, was genuinely getting better technically as a puncher, because he was like, oh, well, this is what I have left. I can't move around anymore. That flavor of athleticism is long gone, but I can still hit hard. So I'm going to start jabbing people. I'm going to start throwing in combinations. I'm going to start countering people and, making them throw and then countering them in exchanges. And now that's not there anymore either. He's now completely gun shy. He seems to get hurt in the very first exchange of every fight. Granted, that applies to many of Little Nog's recent performances, but as our astute MMA math led us to discover before, yes, a win over Sam Alvey is actually better than a win over John Vellante, which was Shogun's last really good-looking performance. Because Sam Alvey beat John Vellante. Yeah, I just think Little Nog has always been the tighter, cleaner puncher, better timing, better mechanics. And if he doesn't get taken down, that leads me to believe he's going to crack Shogun's chin first. That's it. Do you think there will be a knockout?
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine either of these guys surviving any fight to the bell, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Little Nog by KO. Let's move on already to another fight, which is not serious, but is interesting for very different reasons. Fabricio Verdum, Alexander Gustafsson. I've already alluded to it several times. These two men do not enjoy doing MMA. I think that's very clear. Gustafsson hasn't looked like he's had fun in a fight since Rumble. And Fabricio Verdum, I mean, it's really clear what Fabricio Verdum is going through, because he had this exact moment through much of his career where, basically, I think he had recently started training under Cordero. I might be wrong about that. Around the time that he fought Fedor. And then he fought Alistair Overeem. And as we well know, in that fight, his striking was in many ways better than Overeem's. He was landing a lot. He had no confidence in it. More importantly, he had no stamina. It's always been a problem for Verdum, is he has terrible fitness. I just don't think he likes doing cardio, which I get, But in that fight, it was a winnable matchup that he just couldn't allow himself to win. And Cordero was screaming at him for the duration, just go out there and punch him and don't fall on your ass after you land 3 clean shots. Continue to punch him and beat him up in the clinch. It was after that fight that Verdum started taking his fitness much more seriously, and it resulted in the best run of his career, no question. And now he is back. You know, Lord forgive him, he's back to the old Verdum. He's incredibly out of shape. He looks totally unmotivated. I've seen some bad Verdum performances in my life, but have any of them really been worse than that fight with Alexei Oleinik?
No.
Right? He just
literally
got
nothing.
bungalowed. He just got hit with just two big Russian hams just clanging into his head, and he did nothing about it. He had one round of stamina in which he got some wrestling done, and then he couldn't, maintain top position against Oleinik, who just went totally passive on his back for the most part and waited for a chance to explode. And yeah, Verdum couldn't solve that on the ground even. So, what about Gustafsson? Tell me how Gustafsson has been looking lately.
Pretty much as bad.
Well,
I mean, he just doesn't seem to know what kind of fighter he wants to be.
mm-hmm. He seems a lot more lost. Verdum just seems like he's past it. Gustafsson seems he's wandering in the mist, as Eugene Robinson might say.
Yeah, because I got the impression that he wants to be he's decided that he's gotten to this point in his career where he wants to be like an outside sniper kind of fighter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He wants to, be safe. He doesn't want to get into all the exchanges. He's no longer as confident in his own invincibility as he was. He's no longer confident in that at all, as a matter of fact. But he just can't do it because he's not good at it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of it. I mean, yeah, that Anthony Smith fight was also the worst performance of Alexander Gustafsson's career.
Had to be, right?
Can't think of anything remotely as bad as that. I mean, maybe, there's the Rumble fight, but that's not,
he did better
that's
in
just
that.
doing one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was short. He still landed some,
yeah.
He landed some counters and had some good moments until he got knocked down.
Yeah. And Rumble's a much better fight than Anthony Smith and would, eat him and shit him out were he to fight him.
Yes.
But yeah, it was just awful. So you've got to find. I just don't know how these guys are going to approach the fight, because one of the things is that in their primes, you would have expected just an incredibly high-paced, aggressive, banger of a fight.
I would have loved it. Imagine the Verdum who fought Cain Velasquez versus the Gustafsson who fought Jones the first time around.
Yeah.
What an incredible matchup that would be.
People who just refused to take a step backwards. It would have been the wrestling offense and defense would have been incredibly well matched. Mm-hmm. Gustafsson's ability to scramble back to his feet has always been excellent. It would have been amazing to see how that matched up against Verdum. He would have had the cardio edge, but he probably would have had, but as I said, Verdum would have been able to probably get takedowns on him. I mean, yeah, it would have been a fantastic fight. With this one, I have no idea what it's going to look like. Who's even going to initiate exchanges?
Yeah, I mean, my basic read, I said at the top, actually, before we started, I was like, well, Gustafsson's not going to throw much, but he's not going to get taken down. But I'm not really sure of that anymore. He used to have, He got
crushed on the floor by Smith.
Yes. Yeah, not just great get-ups. He's always had great, going back to the Phil Davis fight. Even before then, he had good takedown defense. He just, he had good tactical takedown defense. He would just get sucked into a wrestling match that didn't favor him. But, since then, he's had pretty ironclad takedown defense. We have seen both Cormier and Jones struggle mightily to take him down, and in fact, he managed to take both of them down with just good timing. That with the ability to get back up. And yet, do you remember the exchange that finished, that had Smith dominating him on the floor in the fourth round? Gustafsson went for that, Cub Swanson, Dennis Seaver style, counter hip toss. As Smith was crashing into him. He missed. He stumbled over and fell and then just didn't try to get back up. And Smith got in his back. it was very disinterested looking, grappling from Gustafsson. Maybe he was tired. I mean, I'm sure he was. It was the 4th round. He's always been a guy who gets tired and then fights pretty well anyway. But yeah, like that's such a terrible look. And you know, we also saw Jones getting him down with way more takedowns. Granted, there was an injury there, but it's not like he looked any better against Smith after the fact. I just think his confidence is shot. And
I mean, didn't Smith have a broken hand? Like
I think you might be right.
If you looked at that fight, you were like, oh yeah, one of these guys is compromised. It was Smith.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I just don't know. Yeah, the total inactivity and everything. That's the thing, is it? At a baseline, I want to say Gustafsson's hard to take down, and he's just a better striker than Verdum, except at his very sharpest, which he's no longer anywhere close to that. But, you know, like, what did Gustafsson do on the feet against Smith? What Oleinik did to beat Verdum was intense pressure. You know, full on, like charging forward, making him exchange. Gustafsson's not going to do that. I'm especially unsure of that in his like first fight against a bigger opponent. That often also has a sort of a detrimental like effect on your confidence. So I don't fucking know. Do you pick Verdum? No, because if he doesn't finish in the first round, what's he going to do? Phil, I need you to answer these questions. These are not rhetorical.
Here's my rationale.
Yeah.
Gustafsson is going to be able to approximately replicate the Glover Teixeira fight because Verdum is so slow and so fat.
Right.
That he's not going to be able to track him down, and Gustafsson will be able to build his confidence in real time. By punching Verdum in the face.
You think Gustafsson's footwork is not great, but we have seen some pointed examples of how bad Verdum's pressuring footwork can be.
Exactly. He's no better, and indeed probably worse than, a good deal worse than Teixeira at this stage of his career. So I think Gustafsson's going to go out there being like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing. But he still, against Smith, he still threw a bunch of, like, non-committal jabs.
And they're just going to land easily.
Yeah, Verdum's just going to eat them, and then Verdum's going to chase him, and he's going to do something dumb, and then Gustafsson, like, there'll be, like, a little glimmer of light opening up, and he'll be like, I do like MMA when I'm winning
bullying
super easily against a really slow person.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds pretty good, actually. I think that's a good read. There's still, I think, a much bigger risk than there ever has been before, and I can't really overstate that, of Verdum getting Gustafsson down early and submitting him.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Gustafsson is clearly one of those fighters who he's like a horse. You know, like, he gets traumatized by a thing once, and he never forgets it. Gustafsson you know what I mean? Like, if Gustafsson walking from his house to the grocery store, if he trips and hurts his toe on a crack in the sidewalk, he's going to be like, his ears are going to be twitching. He's going to be nervously shifting his feet whenever he goes anywhere near that patch of sidewalk for the rest of his life. But I do think that's true to an extent. Like, it's like with,
I love the way that you decided to compare one of these fighters to a horse, and it is not, in fact, the go horse. It is his opponent.
Yeah, well, that's what, Vai Cavallo is what you say when you've mounted the horse, you see?
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. So I do think that is a thing with some fighters more than others. Like we've said this many times about Thales Leites having Anderson Silva flashbacks whenever somebody starts to put him on the end of a jab, and his confidence just crumbles because he's like, oh god, I've lost this fight before. I recognize this feeling. And Gustafsson, yeah, I mean, ever since Rumble, he has been. I've not seen many fighters who actually have. In a long-term way, reacted worse to one knockout. And like it has so totally eroded their confidence. So maybe Gustafsson has now been out-grappled a few times, and he's now reached a point where he's like, oh god, it all falls apart. He let Smith mount his back so easily. I have no confidence in him as an anti-grappler at all anymore. So I'm still going to pick him though. I think your shape of the fight sounds the most accurate. I think that's a good read. So let's see. What else do we want to talk about? I guess there's one more guy here. I mean, there are a couple. Like I said, there's quite a few fights on this card that interest me actually. But there's one more guy who is currently a hot commodity that I think we have to discuss, at least in brief. That is Khamzat Chimaev, who has a great nickname that I am now too embarrassed to repeat on this show in front of Phil. But it's Hazmat. Phil, what did you think of his UFC debut? It was just a week ago, and now it's going to be a 2-week space between the destruction of old John Phillips and this next opponent, Rhys McKee.
I thought it was impressive, but also, as you mentioned before we started the show, I think it's also one of those ones where it might be really easy to overrate Chimaev off a win like that, because he basically really badly outgrappled a really bad grappler.
Yes. I would have been, forget the white Mike Tyson, I would have been more impressed if Chimaev did that to the real Mike Tyson. You know what I mean? Who has no wrestling ability or anything and is 55 years old. It's still, that guy would have been more likely to knock him out in the attempt.
But, I mean, even for that, he still absolutely buzzsawed him.
Oh, yeah.
And looks like he has a really nasty back mount. He can really hurt people from, like, short positions. He's going to be a comically huge welterweight, and I have no idea how he's going to make welterweight for this fight.
Yeah, he weighed in at 186 last weekend, which is not an insane amount in 2 weeks, if you're already in fight shape, I guess, to cut, for a guy who clearly walks around probably at 180, 190-ish. But, yeah, it's a lot.
He
weighed in at 186. Do you think he's much bigger than that?
He looked pretty big. That's what I'm just very confused by.
That fair enough. I was kind of thinking, maybe he just didn't really cut for that fight. But that was an assumption. You might be right. He may have cut 10 pounds to make 186.
Yeah. I mean, he's a big man.
Definitely. Very
26
much
years old.
Very much like Khabib. He's huge. He's got that sort of Fedor-esque ability to generate power from close lockdown positions. Like just really good, like upper body rotation, is what, torque is what you have when you don't have any weight to transfer on the ground. And he does a great job of torquing his punches to the target. He's got all of these like Khabib I elements to his ground game. One thing I did notice, he did not do nearly as well as Khabib does is, the old, I'm going to use Michael Bisping's term for this because I like it. I think it's much better than a cross wrist or whatever the fuck you want to call it. The Dagestani handcuff. Have you heard him use this term, Phil?
Yeah, I've had it. Love it.
I think it's a good one. It's very nice and colorful, and Khabib's the guy who has really popularized it. But when you reach around the guy's back, I'm explaining this to the listeners. When you reach around the guy's back and you get the far wrist, and you control it through the armpit, over the top of the wrist. So it is really like it's handcuffed to his own hip. It's a fantastic way to completely destroy any possibility of posting on that side, which is what makes it so effective for Khabib. He can, he doesn't have to do the whole like switching between, am I breaking you down with wrestling or am I hitting you with strikes while you try to posture up? He has you broken down. It's a control position, especially against the fence when you can't roll out of it, to get back to a half guard or something. And then he can just wail away. Chimaev didn't really do that. He actually let John Phillips post a lot. He let him build up. And maybe he's just more comfortable in those positions and he's happy to let someone, get a little window to run towards so he can get to a better spot. That's a possibility. But, I'll be curious to see how that looks going forward. I have no reason to expect that he's not going to do exactly similar kinds of things to this guy, Rhys McKee. Although that being said, I'm not as familiar with Rhys McKee even as I am with John Phillips. The main interest in this matchup is clearly just seeing Khamzat Chimaev again at his official weight class and getting a better picture of what he looks like as a 170 fighter, which is Phil, as you noted, is probably going to be huge. He's just going to look huge. So I'm excited to see him back. And like I said, Nicholas Dalby, Jesse Ronson, I like that fight. Francisco Trinaldo's on here. Ramzan Amaev and Nathaniel Wood. Betch Kohea is fighting Pani Kianzad, which is a beautiful, athletically limited women's bantamweight fight. That should actually be very entertaining. Alex Oliveira, Peter Sabota. Paul Craig is going to have yet another Russian man smash him and maybe give him a chance to secure a triangle. He's fighting Godzimurad Antigulov. Carla Esparza, Marina Rodriguez is a very good fight. It's not a bad card, folks. But that is all the time we have to preview things from that card this week. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to discuss the tragic end of Joe Benavidez's hopes for that long deferred UFC title. We're going to talk about Jack Hermanson absolutely smushing Kelvin Gastelum on the ground. We're going to talk about Rafael Fiziev and a fantastic fight that he had with Mark Jacasey, and more after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Alrighty, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Did I really just start segment 3 by saying alrighty? Yes, I am a white man from the Midwest. Welcome back to the show. We're talking in retrospective now. We've wrapped up our previewing, and I don't want to even think about this, to be honest. But Joe Benavidez, that was a, if Joe Benavidez had survived the round that he just lost to Davis and Figueiredo, it would have been a 10-7. No question. 100% one-sided. Let's look at the stats. Did Joe Benavidez land anything?
Yeah, he landed some strikes. There were moments where I was like, oh yeah, maybe he's going to be able to
weather it,
do something with this in order to be able to survive. But yes, it was one of the most brutal one-round shellackings I've ever seen.
Right. The very first shot that Figueiredo landed just clubbed Joe B on the side of the head, and he never really recovered. So I don't know, what do you have to say about that fight and what played out?
I mean, it definitely showed what we feared might have been true, which is that Joe B's tendency to, blitz and lead with his face, could be bad in rematches if devoted counterpunchers dial in on it. And indeed, that was very, very true.
Yeah.
It really did seem like there was an arc linking through the two fights, and it seemed like it might have been one which Benavidez could have possibly adjusted around, but he was getting beaten up so bad, so quickly, that there just wasn't anything to be done about it. He'd immediately figured out, Figueiredo immediately went back to exactly what he was doing before, which was just using left hook to herd Joe into the right hand and vice versa, counterpunching when Joe came in, and it was just a slaughter.
It was really the counterpunching, wasn't it? Because Figueiredo, he repeatedly beat, this was the really crushing thing, he repeatedly beat Joe in the very first layer. He really took advantage of Joe's tendency, especially early, to not set anything up. Or rather to set up the latter half of the combination with just a really hard first half of the combination, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a, I'm going to throw this thing, you're supposed to react, and then I'm going to catch you with what comes after it. There's very little I'm going to test you with a feint and see what what you might react to this with, and then I'm going to try maybe an attack, and then I'm going to add some layers. He kept wanting to just charge him with something hard, and Figueiredo made the correct read for a man with a huge athletic advantage. If you can even, a big one. Joe Benavidez is still pretty athletic, I think, at this point in his career. Still pretty damn athletic. But it was the correct read for the bigger puncher, anyway, which is, I'm just going to throw back whenever he steps in with anything. And repeatedly, he met him in the first layer of the exchange and just beat him because he hit harder, more accurate. He knew exactly what he was looking for. I don't want to sell this as just like some dumb brute performance either. Like, that was exactly what he needed to do. He, as you said, he took away from the first fight. Oh, this is where he can't really compete with me. He's going to lunge in. I'm just going to meet him. Except this time it was so dialed in. I don't know, man. It sucked. It sucked for me. I didn't like that. And it made me, it really made me feel that the only reason I picked Joe is because I like him.
I don't think you actually picked Joe on this show. I think you might have cheat-edged it.
Thank goodness. At least I was right.
Shut up. You picked him on the vivisection.
Did I flip-flop?
Yes, you hedged it. I'm sure you did.
Oh no. I try never to do that. Oops.
But yeah, it was also that, he, Figueiredo was already catching Joe as he circled, as he was doing towards the end of their last fight.
Right.
But yeah.
Just started right away this time.
It's hard not to say that Joe has been a very athletically dependent fighter. If that is going, he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
People are going to notice that, his fearlessness can get him, countered.
Yep.
And they're going to be more ready to do that as time goes on. Figueiredo, there's Askarov, there's Moreno, and there's Perez, and those all sound like great fights.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe less so Askarov. I just don't think he can compete physically. But...
I tend to agree. Yeah, that's really what I want to talk about, though. Is there's not a whole lot to say about this matchup because it was so utterly one-sided. Figueiredo had the right idea, and it just kept working. And I think by the end of this round, he just stepped in and threw a right hand for the final knockdown. Benavidez just covered up and it got through. There's not even a whole lot of craft to that. It's just that Benavidez was already, I think, done. And if he could have survived, he would have needed the break between rounds to do anything differently or to survive another punch like that. Granted, the scrambling, still insane. I don't know how Joe Benavidez got out of 3 completely sunk in rear naked chokes with his body fully extended and a strong back mount. The 4th one, no luck. But, it's as we often get at the end of great fighters' careers, sort of like a sad echo, of something remarkable about Joe Benavidez in his prime, which is that he's just unchokeable. So clearly that's not true anymore either. What I really wanted to talk about is who else does Deiveson Figueiredo fight? Because he made weight. He's now the flyweight champion. As you said, Askarov. The one that I really wanted was Brandon Moreno. I might like to see him get another win first. But, you mentioned Askarov. I think that because they were on the same card, that name, popped up a lot immediately after this. And I think Askarov has really impressed me in the UFC. He's shown a lot of skills that I never really expected him to have based on his pre-UFC footage. Most notably, the jab. He's got a nice jab. In fact, he can throw a good jab from both stances. But I tend to agree with you that he doesn't really have any kind of shot against Figueiredo. What is your reasoning?
I just don't think he has the firepower.
Yeah.
That's pretty much just it. I think Moreno's grown into his frame. Obviously Perez is looking like he's extremely dangerous. I just don't think Askarov can. I mean, he was on the bad end of the firepower equation against Pantoja, and Pantoja got outgunned by Figueiredo. Seems fairly straightforward.
Yeah,
but I think the real thing is that we have talk about is that the UFC is clearly deliberately hiding Figueiredo from Dustin Ortiz by cutting Dustin Ortiz ages ago.
They knew.
They knew that this was going to happen, and they just didn't want their precious, violent, new Brazilian flyweight champion to be put anywhere near Dustin Ortiz. And that's why they got rid of him. And
it's bullshit.
Everyone knows, including Sriram, that a man who basically lost to Jared Brooks would have nothing for Dustin Ortiz, and they need to campaign for him to come back.
You're calling out Sriram because he is a fucking mark for these like athletic goons, right?
Yeah.
He loves Davis and Figueiredo. God, Jesus, how embarrassing. I think you're 100% right. I do want to say, for real, not that I was being facetious before, Dustin Ortiz absolutely hosed. Why is that man not? This is something we found out. We were discussing this before the show began. The UFC flyweight roster, men's flyweight, it has 26 fighters on it. Women's flyweight in the UFC, 39. I don't think I'm going to be shocking anyone when I say that men's flyweight is a vastly deeper division than women's flyweight. So much better. I mean, anyone who's watched any women's flyweight fight, you know, we've got a couple people who are making waves now, but it's just Valentina Shevchenko and a bunch of nobodies. And men's flyweight is full of talent. It's a very exciting division, and yet, yeah, I don't know. I do agree. I think Dustin Ortiz, get him back in the UFC, one win, or if he just comes in off a win, I haven't exactly been keeping up with his career. He would be a great challenger for Figueiredo. It would be a fantastically exciting fight too. As you've said before, Phil, Dustin Ortiz's fight with Joe Benavidez, like Dustin Ortiz against an athletic scrambler, nonstop grappling action. And he's fun on the feet too. He's a very high-paced fighter. Love Dustin Ortiz. What about Brandon Moreno? I tend to agree, by the way, that Askarov, yeah, I think he's got a good jab. I think he's got too many defensive liabilities, though. And footwork, like he was able to box up Tim Elliott for long stretches, but that's Tim Elliott. He has no notion of how to cut off the cage, no notion of how to defend himself while he's coming forward. He really let Askarov's jabbing shine. Pantoja is just marginally better, technically speaking, as a come-forward fighter, and Askarov had a lot less success jabbing off the back foot. And then otherwise, he's gonna what? He's gonna out-wrestle Figueiredo? He's gonna do better timing on takedowns than Jussier Formiga did, and not lose position. He's gonna have the patience to lock down, and it's just not the kind of fighter he is. And then you just factor in the physicality, and I agree. Brandon Moreno, to me, though, of the, some 15 meaningful flyweights that there are in the UFC right now, that's a very interesting fight with Figueiredo. I think I might pick Brandon Moreno over Figueiredo. Though I think he would get probably dropped really hard in one of the first two rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a dogfight.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if I would pick Moreno. I think he would probably give Figueiredo probably too many countering opportunities.
Sure.
But, much like he did when he fought Pantoja, someone who's just willing to sit there, bite down, and return.
He's different.
But, yeah, I think it would be a fantastic fight.
How different do you think Brandon Moreno is from the guy who fought Pantoja?
Reasonably.
I tend to think so. I mean, there was a brief period where I thought he was getting better, and he wasn't really. But the sort of the striking we saw, what was that last fight? One of the recent Formiga, right? And before that was Kai Kara France, right? Mm-hmm. And in both of those, his boxing has looked tremendously improved. He's got a great quick jab. Everything comes in combinations. He still has like a crazy dog in him. So he's going to go in there and create exchanges rather than like drawing things out and slipping around them. But he does that more and more as the fight goes on. He gets a little smarter and more complex in the layering. And just breakneck pace. which I think is obviously a really big advantage against a guy like Figueiredo down the stretch. So that's a fantastic matchup. If I had to pick one, I would want to see that one next. If it wasn't Dustin Ortiz.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. What else happened on this card? Well, the co-main event, Jack Hermansson, Kelvin Gastelum. What happened in this fight, Phil?
It was really weird.
Well, Jack Hermansson and Kelvin Gastelum were fighting.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't what I expected. It was one of those ones where we called the fight right, but the shape of it was very strange. I mean, it felt like one of those weird intersections where Gastelum has gotten by a lot in grappling exchanges, I feel, due to how relaxed he is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that he's kind of, he's a very naturally flowy and almost indifferent grappler, which has meant that in a lot of cases he can scramble quite effectively because he's very calm. But in this case, this was just one of those things where he just needed to get out. He needed to get out very quickly, and he didn't, and he got submitted.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing we see a lot. There are many fighters. This is a big part of the current, like, striking heavy meta game. I know how much people love that term. But there are many fighters who have a relatively shallow idea of what to do on the ground, against whatever variety of attacks or positions. Like, the rule of thumb is, get to all fours, pop back to your feet, or run to the fence. It's scramble. And that's what Gastelum tried to do. Hermansson, have we seen any leg locks from Hermansson before? I feel like we've seen him hit a sweep or two, or advance position with a leg lock. But
yeah, it really looked like he was going to go for a half guard sweep, but then he was just like, it was heel hook time.
As far as I could tell, not being a leg lock expert, it was really well executed. And it was exactly, I talk about this in the flyweight metagame all the time, that the scramble heavy division and certain guys just have great top position technique. And so they, the people with the shallower games, like, they just start to break apart very quickly. Once they realize that they just aren't getting the scrambles they want, and they have to go technique for technique in these disadvantageous positions. Hermansson had a very similar dynamic because Gastelum tried to rush his way out. It was not a dumb response, really. It's the kind of thing that's worked for him his entire career, really, where he just tried to step up and limp leg out really quickly. And, Hermansson was just on both legs the entire time. That was the thing that stood out to me watching live anyway, was that Hermansson did such a good job of not only, controlling and keeping the knee of the leg he was trying to attack, but using his insteps, using his hooks to control the far leg. Both to bring Gastelum down and to keep him from either stepping out or turning around. It also prevented Gastelum from doing the other
kicking out.
Yeah, the other classic escape, which is like kicking off Hermansson's butt. He was totally trapped. So it was just a really well executed leg lock. I just didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. You were saying before, I kind of want to touch on this. Is Kelvin Gastelum one of those fighters who doesn't like fighting? What makes you think that?
I mean, it does seem like he might have gone from having one of those guys who went from having a career high performance against Adesanya. And, this has been heavily overplayed in terms of how successful he was and all this other kind of stuff.
It's mostly two moments.
But it's still by far the best performance of his career, technically.
Yeah.
He was looking way better. And then against Till, he just looked completely, lackadaisical.
But not necessarily in a way we haven't seen him look lackadaisical before. That's my opinion. It's the fact that it came right after the Adesanya fight that jars you, right? Because it's such a dramatic return. But I don't know. Like, I just think he got really excited and probably game planned for maybe the first time ever, really intensely, for what he was going to do to Adesanya. He's super motivated. And I just think he just doesn't, I don't know. As you summed it up before, I'm not sure that Kelvin Gastelum is like introspective enough to use a more polite word. It's not exactly introspective enough to like, to take that kind of thing to heart that easily. I mean, immediately after Hermansson submitted him, he was on there. His Twitter handle is still #OnAMission4Gold. And he was like, you know, never quit, whatever, I'll be back, I'm excited or whatever. He seemed in very good spirits. So I don't know. I just don't think he likes changing, but I think he likes this life. I think he enjoys being a professional fighter. My read. That's my armchair psychology. What I really want to talk about, Phil, forget Kelvin Gastelum. Stop. Quit talking about him. Rafael Fiziev was on this card. And, I'm kind of mad at myself because, I went in there full Pat Wyman mode. I was like, hey, this is the same matchup that Mark Jacasey lost to Nasrat Haqparast, at least very similar. This is a pressuring high output fighter, with a number of intelligent setups for combination attacks. This guy is going to be in Jacasey's face. And my thinking was, Fiziev is not the athlete that Nasrat Haqparast is. Mark Jacasey did find the right adjustments against Haqparast in spots. This time around, he's going to find them easier and earlier. They're going to have a bigger impact when he does. And, nope, it was the same fight, except that Jacasey didn't get hurt quite as bad. But on the flip side, I don't know. It took him, it basically reinforced that the pattern of the Haqparast fight is a pattern that Jacasey is going to be stuck in. It's a style matchup thing where when someone is really aggressive and determined early on, or maybe always, he's just kind of he's worked himself into being a slow starter. His immediate response to that kind of pressure is to back off and not to fire back, not to stand his ground. You know, I watched that fight with Haqparast again, last week, and there's like a moment in round 3 where Jacasey finally meets a rush by just not moving away. And Haqparast crashes into him, and Jacasey just shoves him off. This is an exhausted Jacasey who's been hurt several times. And, I thought maybe he would come to that realization faster this time around. As you said before to me, Phil, he definitely won the third round, in my opinion too. Mm-hmm. So he still found those moments, but it was the same fight. So it really just feels like I should have called that a little better.
But also, this was a great fight.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why everyone is excited about this guy now.
Yeah.
It is very rare that you see pressure integrated with defense like that.
Right.
Because whilst he clearly didn't have the physical firepower of Haqparast, he still has a lot.
Sure.
And he was able to put it together, without getting himself in trouble. Mm-hmm. I mean, countering kicks with punches, slipping, parrying, you name it, and keeping a very high pace in the face of an extremely dynamic, dangerous, striker.
Right.
So that, the Mustafayev fight, you can kind of see how that might have happened, because he does, he is fearless about grabbing his slice of range.
Right.
But you can also see how, that would not be a replicable way of Mustafayev winning that fight at all, and he probably wouldn't win a rematch.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, there's still the same openings in how Fiziev sort of moves his head, how he positions himself defensively. I'm being a pedant. It could happen, but yes, it wouldn't happen again. I was most impressed by Fiziev's defense more than anything else. And that's saying something, because his offensive striking is really eye-catching. It's loud and it's quick. And the combinations are really good to look at. But mostly it was because I spent this whole fight, internally screaming at Jacasey to make the right adjustments. I was wanting him to lead with his jab, stand his ground more. I was wanting to finish combinations with the left hook. And to be fair to Jacasey, he did try those things here and there, And Fiziev was able to add layers onto those exchanges really easily. He would initiate, Jacasey would counter, and Fiziev repeatedly would slip a couple shots and then come back with his own counters. Everything kind of building off of the jab. But he did a really great job of just staying facing his opponent as he was moving his head and being ready to fire right back as soon as they were done trying to get him. That's not something you see very often from MMA fighters. It seems like they have a pretty good striking coach over there at Tiger Muay Thai.
Well, I mean, we saw him striking there.
Right.
But yeah, I genuinely thought this was actually a really encouraging performance from Jacasey as well, because I thought that the level he started developing much more technical depth throughout the fight, as in his response to things like body kicks changed. At the beginning, he was just trying to catch them, and he was just like, "No, this isn't going to work."
God, the body
so he
kicks.
started to step into them. But he didn't try and counter because he realized that wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
He started stepping into them and then trying to dictate a ranged exchange with his own jab, which made a lot more sense because Fiziev is much shorter than him, and due to Fiziev's defense, Jacasey just wasn't able to start hard exchanges with him unless Fiziev was already throwing.
He had to draw the defense out first.
Yeah. And, he tightened up on his left hook.
Mm-hmm.
He threw his punches shorter. It was one of those unfair fights because it was one of those ones where, Costa Adesanya, it was one guy just banging in tons of really hard, clearly, clean body work and then getting more tired than the other guy.
Right.
And I'm just like, well, it's just not fair.
Jacasey went on Twitter the day after and posted his body conditioning because it was genuinely very impressive. The quantity of body kicks he absorbed and the sound of those body kicks landing. They were right under the elbows, super hard kicks from Fiziev. And Jacasey didn't even slow down. Yeah, I agree that was very impressive. The other thing though, I don't know. I found myself less impressed because they were basically the same adjustments that he made in the Haqparast fight, and they followed basically the same pattern. They took the same amount of time to really materialize. And this is the other thing too. I have to reiterate one of my major questions going into this was how good is Fiziev's takedown defense? And it was certainly good enough to deal with Mark Jacasey. I had it as a major question mark, a way that Jacasey could very likely get himself into the fight because, he's very strong and he used to do a lot of wrestling with his opponents. But it is definitely, it really struck home for me the idea that Jacasey has sort of Phil Davis'd his own game, that now that he's become this, he's never been a really technical wrestler, but back in his pre-UFC days, he was super aggressive with it. He would just barrel into his opponents and just grab onto them. And, I don't expect that approach to work at this level, but unless he seriously ups the level of craft in his takedown attempts, how he sets them up, how he executes them, this new game is not, it doesn't enhance what wrestling skill Jacasey has at all. It makes it a lot harder to get to those ranges. So it was good to see that Fiziev's takedown defense was very much up to snuff, but also it emphasized for me that Jacasey's wrestling is less effective than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to feel like that's a serious level of, it's just also just a level of competition thing.
I agree.
I think he would have had to have developed it quite a lot. I know he's not but yeah, it would be interesting to see him, maybe go to train wherever Leon Edwards trains, and see if he can get some more kind of interstitial pieces into that game. But honestly, I thought he did. I mean, for his levels of we've seen him go to beating, Joe Duffy, and then I think it's expecting a lot of him to be able to beat a guy who comes out and immediately appears to be maybe like a top 3 defensive fighter in MMA? Like top 5 at the most, in terms of like being able to string together offense and defense at the same time.
I don't want to agree, but fair enough. He's up there, at least. Just because of how rare that, defense and offense being smoothly combined is across the board. Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
I mean, I just, like I said, I was just really happy to see this fight, actually. I was just, I thought like both guys really showed up. They showed why you should be excited for both of them. Fiziev, and I think, Chikadze shows he still has time to develop, but that he can develop, that he's still tough in fights. He doesn't get broken by something like that. And Fiziev, everyone is really excited to see him now. So that was great.
For good reason. Yeah, and it was just a very exciting contest too. Can't disagree with any of that. Well, good stuff. Very entertaining and meaningful week of fights. Truth be told. And I'm really looking forward to Whittaker versus Till coming up this next weekend. So that's pretty much it. Phil, you suggested earlier today that if we have nothing to plug for ourselves, which is frequently the case these days, I am working on other stuff, folks. All right, I'm doing scouting reports and things. I'm not just not writing articles for no reason. And as soon as I'm not working on scouting reports, I will come up with a different reason for why I'm not producing articles. Don't worry. But you suggested that while we don't have things of our own to plug, we should maybe mention some things that we have read recently, which led me to believe you had something in mind.
Oh yeah, just a couple of quick hits. Check out friend of the show, Ben Cohn, did a brief breakdown on the grappling side of what we saw on Figueiredo Benavidez too. So he had a look at the Hermansson heel hook. You might want to check that out, especially because we don't normally go into too much depth on the grappling side. And I think also Danny Martin has done a breakdown of the other kickboxing lightweight that everyone's super excited with, and that Zane, that bastard, is trying to match up with Fiziev, who is Brad Riddell.
Ah, yes. They love Brad Riddell, don't they, those fight side kids?
Yeah, he is, in fact, possibly the greatest striking Riddell that we've seen in the UFC thus far.
Now, we are... does Liddell count as a Riddell?
No, but Matt certainly does.
Yes. Well, the competition's not that stiff, to be fair. But yeah. As for me, I don't know. I don't read any of these technique bullshit. That's what I do for a living. But I did read several parts of, still not the whole thing, of Tim Bissell's The Mitchell Paradox on Bloody Elbow.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is really good. He follows around this MMA fighter, David Mitchell, and it's pretty fucking harrowing. Like the life of an MMA fighter is ripe for tragedy and strife. And it's basically just a really in-depth look at this guy's life. And I think Tim did a fantastic job. Based on, I think, the 3 parts of it that I've read so far. So I would go check that out on Bloody Elbow, The Mitchell Paradox, or For the Love and Hate of Fighting by Tim Bissell. All right. Well, thank you all so much.
That does sound fantastic. Yeah, I really like Tim's work.
It's very good so far.
And I will definitely check it out myself.
As he describes it, an 8-part literary nonfiction series that chronicles the life and career of David Dowdy Mitchell. Who went 1-4 in the UFC, which also appeals to guys like you and me, Phil. They sort of are interested in the sort of dregs produced by the promotional machine that is MMA. So check that out. Let's see. Find us on social media at Evil Greg Jackson, at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. I always say social media. It's Twitter, folks. We're on Twitter. Find us on there. Yell at us. Try to make us laugh. Get blocked by us. Just kidding. I don't block many people. I might argue with you, though. And until next week, thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you wanted to hear some other fights, either from the Cater versus Ige card, or more of the Davison Figueiredo versus Joe Benavidez 2 card that were not featured on the main episode, we covered several of them in a bonus episode that should be up any moment now. and the Heavy Hands Patreon. $3 a month. You can listen to all of our bonus content. We've already put a couple things out this month, so make sure you check that out, including, Phil, our first two really like Rebush Wyman level arguments over Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade. So you can go check that one out. Go see Phil get absolutely pantsed by me with logic, facts, and reason. And otherwise, we'll talk to you all next week. Thanks again for listening. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.
I'm regretful of the fact that I've missed out on a Robin Black breakdown that I could have shouted out.
Oh,